Most citizens live their lives believing that prosperity is the crown jewel of human existence. Yet beneath this glittering illusion lies a deeper hunger, a hunger for justice, which, when awakened, burns brighter than gold itself. Imagine this, a society where wealth flows freely, yet the hearts of its people are chained by corruption, deceit, and betrayal. No treasure can fill the hollow silence left when justice is absent. Gold may dazzle the eye, but it cannot heal the wound of injustice. The true measure of a people is not in their riches, but in their unyielding cry for fairness, for dignity, for truth. Plato once spoke of the divided line, the dualism between the visible and the intelligible. Gold belongs to the visible, a shadow of value, fleeting and external. Justice belongs to the intelligible, eternal, immovable, rooted in the realm of forms where truth itself resides. When citizens awaken to this dualism, they begin to see that wealth without justice is nothing more than polished chains, binding them to tyranny with their own consent. And in that awakening lies the first seed of revolution, not a revolution of arms, but of souls, where the cry for fairness eclipses the thirst for gain. You, the citizen, must ask yourself, do you value the gleam of coins more than the integrity of your soul? Would you trade the health of your conscience for the abundance of your pockets? The Stoics would tell you, as Marcus Aurelius whispered in the stillness of dawn, that wealth is neither good nor evil, it is only raw material. Justice, however, is the divine spark, the virtue that binds humanity to the eternal order. Epictetus would remind you that freedom is not granted by riches, but by the discipline of aligning oneself to nature and truth. In every era, leaders have dangled wealth before the eyes of their people, knowing that gold blinds more swiftly than lies. But what happens when the people begin to see through the glitter? What happens when citizens realize that the true philosopher king does not hoard treasures, but guards justice as sacred flame? That is when societies shift. That is when the balance of power trembles, when the tyrant's palace shakes, not from rebellion of swords, but from rebellion of minds. Consider the archetype of the greedy citizen, the one who places possessions above principle. He lives with full hands, but an empty soul, a hollow man who mistakes applause for honor. Then consider the archetype of the just citizen, the one who may live with little, but who walks with unshakable dignity, knowing that his voice belongs to truth itself. History shows us which of these archetypes endures. Wealthy empires have crumbled to dust, but the memory of justice seekers lives on, immortalized in the conscience of nations. Perhaps you have felt it yourself, the sharp sting when injustice pierces your world. Perhaps you have been cheated, silenced, ignored, while others prospered through deceit. In that moment, did gold bring you comfort, or did your soul demand something higher, something that wealth could never purchase? This is the psychology of awakening, the recognition that no external possession can substitute for internal order, for justice that flows like living water. Most leaders fear this awakening more than war itself, for when citizens desire justice more than gold, they become ungovernable by corruption. They cannot be bought, they cannot be silenced, they cannot be swayed by empty promises. Such citizens rise as guardians of their own destiny, as protectors of the ideal state that Plato envisioned, a state where justice is not ornament, but foundation. And yet there is tragedy. Many societies never reach this awakening. They remain intoxicated by wealth, distracted by pleasures, enslaved by comforts. The tyrant thrives in such lands, knowing that so long as the people crave gold, justice can be buried beneath palaces and marketplaces. But even in these lands, the few awaken. The archetypal few, those who would rather walk in poverty with integrity than bathe in riches with dishonor. These are the seeds of transformation, the invisible fire that waits beneath the ashes of complacency. The question, then, is not whether wealth has value, it surely does, but whether it can ever be valued above the sacred order of justice. To the philosopher, the answer is clear. Gold is the shadow, justice is the light. To the citizen who awakens, the choice becomes unshakable. No throne, no coin, no glittering reward can outweigh the voice of truth that whispers within. When a society turns its gaze away from glitter and toward truth, the very atmosphere shifts. Markets may still bustle, coins may still exchange hands, but the heartbeat of the people changes tempo. Citizens begin to see each other not as competitors in an endless struggle for wealth, but as co-guardians of an eternal principle. This is the birth of civic virtue, the moment when the collective soul realizes that without justice, prosperity is only a gilded coffin. Plato envisioned the just state as one where each class, each soul, fulfills its proper function in harmony. The rulers embody wisdom, the guardians courage, the producers temperance, and together justice is born. Yet this harmony is not sustained by gold or power, but by the deep psychological contract between citizen and truth. When citizens value justice above wealth, they embody temperance, the discipline to restrain desire so that fairness may flourish. The philosopher kings, if they emerge, can then lead not through fear, but through reverence, mirroring the eternal order of the cosmos. But you, citizen, must confront the shadow. It whispers to you daily, the promise that gold will solve your hunger, that wealth will shield you from pain, that possession is the true measure of life. And yet, every philosopher, from Seneca to Marcus Aurelius, warns that fortune is fickle, slipping from one hand to another like sand in a storm. If your loyalty is to gold, your loyalty is to an unstable master. But if your loyalty is to justice, your soul anchors itself to what is unchanging, untouchable, eternal. This is why unjust leaders fear the awakening of their people. They know that wealth can bribe, but justice cannot. They know that markets can be controlled, but conscience cannot be chained. When citizens crave fairness, when they demand transparency, when they hunger for truth more fiercely than for bread, the very ground beneath tyrants begins to fracture, for no palace of gold can withstand the earthquake of an awakened populace. Imagine, then, the archetypal struggle playing out in every nation. On one side, the citizens who sleep, lulled by glittering distractions. On the other, the citizens who awaken, whose eyes pierce through illusion to the essence of justice itself. History records the outcomes. The Roman Empire, at its height, glittered with riches, but its decay was hastened not by poverty, but by the erosion of virtue. Wealth flowed, but corruption devoured its foundations. Marcus Aurelius, even as emperor, wrote of this decay, warning that without discipline of the soul, even an empire of gold crumbles like dust. You too live within this drama. Perhaps you stand at the crossroads. On one path lies comfort bought by silence, gold earned by compromise, security paid for with your conscience. On the other lies the steep, uncertain road of justice, where the rewards may not gleam, but the soul remains unbroken, untarnished, eternal. Which path will you choose? For the fate of nations is decided not by the wealth of a few leaders, but by the conscience of many citizens. The Stoics taught that justice is not an external prize, but a way of aligning oneself with nature, with logos, with the divine order. To live unjustly is to live against the grain of the universe itself, to invite inner torment even amidst outward prosperity. To live justly, even in hardship, is to live in harmony, to find freedom even within chains. This paradox is the heart of power. The citizen who desires justice more than gold is already freer than the richest tyrant. And so, the narrative deepens. Justice is not merely a social contract, it is a psychological liberation. When you choose fairness over fortune, you release yourself from slavery to desire. You become immune to manipulation, to bribes, to the gilded cages of false promises. Leaders cannot control you. Tyrants cannot buy you. You stand as a pillar, unshakable, a mirror of the eternal form itself. Thus, the awakening spreads. One citizen becomes two, two become 10, 10 become a multitude. And when a multitude desires justice more than gold, the state itself begins to transform, not through sudden revolution, but through the steady fire of conscience, burning away corruption, refining leadership, demanding accountability. For in the end, the state is nothing more than the reflection of its citizens' souls. When the hunger for justice outweighs the thirst for wealth, a society undergoes a profound alchemy. The very structure of power shifts, not by decree, but by a silent revolution of values. Leaders accustomed to ruling through opulence, bribes, and spectacles suddenly find their tools dull, their influence waning. For what is gold to a citizen who no longer bows before it? What is privilege to a people who demand integrity over indulgence? In this transformation, the citizen becomes the philosopher, not in cloistered halls, but in the very streets where daily life unfolds. The marketplace, once a theater of greed, becomes a forum of ethics. Conversations drift from prices to principles, from profit to purpose. This is the hidden force Plato foresaw. When the collective psyche tilts toward justice, leadership itself must ascend to meet it. Tyrants cannot survive in such an atmosphere, for their weapons lose potency when the citizen refuses to sell their conscience. Yet history warns that this path is neither smooth nor guaranteed. For every Athens that sought wisdom, there was a Rome that crumbled in decadence. For every Marcus Aurelius who wrote of duty, there were emperors drowned in vanity. The struggle is perpetual, repeating across ages. Justice calling humanity upward, wealth seducing it downward. The question is always the same. Will the citizens awaken, or will they slumber under the lullaby of gold? You, citizen, must face this question in your own soul. Do you barter fairness for gain? Silence your voice for comfort? Turn your eyes away from truth because it is inconvenient? Every small compromise, though invisible, weaves a chain around your spirit. And yet every act of justice, no matter how humble, adds weight to the eternal balance. The Stoics knew this well. Seneca wrote that wealth is not evil in itself, but enslavement to wealth is. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that the measure of man is not what he owns, but what he upholds. The archetype of the just citizen
stands as the greatest safeguard of democracy. Laws, institutions, constitutions all crumble if the citizenry desires gold more than justice. But when fairness is cherished above fortune, even fragile institutions gain strength, for they are rooted in living conscience. This is why true leadership cannot be sustained by external enforcement alone. It must be mirrored in the psychology of the governed. Leadership without justice is brittle, like a statue of clay painted with gold. But leadership supported by citizens who revere fairness is like stone carved by the hand of eternity. Consider the emotional core of this truth. The longing for justice is not merely political, it is deeply human, carved into the very structure of the soul. When a child cries, "That's not fair," it is not greed that speaks, but the primal recognition that order requires balance. To ignore this cry, to smother it with wealth or distractions, is to deny the essence of humanity itself. And yet when grown citizens rekindle that cry, when they stand in unison and demand equity, accountability, and truth, they awaken a force no treasury can rival. The danger is always temptation. Gold dazzles. Wealth offers illusions of safety and control. Entire societies can be lulled into complacency, trading their birthright of justice for the fleeting comfort of consumption. Leaders skilled in manipulation exploit this weakness, dangling wealth as bait while tightening their grip on power. But history has shown time and again that such comfort is temporary, and the cost is catastrophic. For the citizen who abandons justice eventually awakens in chains, their gold meaningless in the shadow of tyranny. And so the question sharpens to a blade. What is the true treasure of a nation? Is it its vaults of riches, its rivers of trade, its gilded palaces? Or is it the incorruptible conscience of its people, the steadfast demand for fairness, the unyielding pursuit of truth? The answer defines not only the state's destiny, but also the destiny of each soul within it. Justice more than gold, this is not a slogan, but a spiritual revolution. It is the hidden law of endurance, the secret rhythm by which civilizations either rise to greatness or collapse into ruins. Leaders may try to resist it, but no ruler can outlast the tide of citizens who have chosen to treasure justice above all else. It is here, in this collective awakening, that the philosopher king becomes possible, not as a solitary ruler, but as a reflection of the people's highest longing. And you, standing at the edge of history, must decide where your loyalty lies. For the state is not some distant institution. It is the mirror of your choices, your voice, your desires. When you desire justice more than gold, you become the very foundation upon which just leadership rests.
When citizens rise beyond the glitter of gold and anchor themselves in justice, they call forth a new kind of order, a rebirth not only of governance, but of the human soul itself. The laws breathe differently. The leaders walk differently. Even the air of the city seems to carry a weight both solemn and liberating. For justice is not merely about courts and decrees, it is about the unseen covenant that binds human beings to one another, a covenant that cannot be bought, only honored. The philosopher kings of Plato's vision were not meant to hoard wealth, nor to wield force, but to embody wisdom so luminous that it guided the entire city. Yet such figures cannot emerge in a society addicted to gold. They are born only where citizens already hunger for justice, where the soil of conscience is fertile enough to sustain leadership that serves truth rather than appetite. In this sense, the citizens themselves become the midwives of justice, birthing it into the world by their collective will. Modern psychology affirms what ancient wisdom already knew, that when wealth dominates desire, corruption soon dominates governance. But when fairness dominates desire, accountability follows naturally. This is why states that thrive are not those with the largest treasuries, but those with the strongest institutions of justice. Institutions guarded not merely by paper laws, but by citizens who refuse to let those laws be mocked. For even the most perfect constitution is powerless if the citizen prefers gold to fairness. Imagine the emotional liberation of such a society. No longer enslaved by bribes, no longer silenced by promises of wealth, citizens walk tall, their voices unshakable. Leaders rise, knowing they are measured not by the fortune they amass, but by the fairness they enact. The state ceases to be a market of power and becomes instead a sanctuary of equity. And within this sanctuary, both ruler and ruled discover a rare kind of peace, the peace that comes from knowing that one stands on the side of the eternal. The Stoics would call this alignment with logos, the divine order. To them, justice was not just a civic duty, but a harmony with the very structure of existence. Epictetus spoke of freedom not as the power to acquire wealth, but as the mastery of one's desires, so that no external lure could enslave the soul. In this same spirit, when citizens collectively master the temptation of gold, they claim a freedom no empire can crush. For even in hardship, their conscience remains untouchable. And it is here that rebirth happens. For the state that treasures justice above wealth does not merely endure, it renews itself, generation after generation, like a flame passed from one hand to another without losing its brilliance. Accountability becomes tradition. Fairness becomes culture. Equity becomes the air breathed by each child born into it. This is no utopia. It is the hard-won reality of a people who choose to anchor themselves in what cannot decay. So the choice remains, gold or justice, fleeting desire or eternal order. One path ends in chains, the other in freedom. One builds empires that collapse under their own corruption. The other builds nations that outlive their rulers and inspire ages to come. The weight of this choice rests not only with leaders, but with every citizen who casts a vote, raises a voice, or stays silent. And perhaps the truest paradox is this: the society that desires justice more than gold eventually gains both. For wealth pursued without justice slips away like sand, but wealth protected by fairness endures. Justice guards prosperity as the soul guards the body. But when wealth is pursued above justice, both vanish, leaving only ruins behind. So let this truth settle deep within you. A nation is not what it owns, but what it honors. And the citizen who treasures justice more than gold becomes the silent architect of a legacy that no tyrant, no empire, no flood of time can erase. True leaders are not crowned by wealth, they are upheld by justice. And true citizens are not measured by what they possess, but what they protect. For in the end, power fades, riches rot, and monuments crumble. But justice endures. Friends, do you believe that gold blinds more swiftly than lies? As a citizen, what would you demand from your leader? Justice or gold? Please, let me know your thoughts below. Thank you for watching.